4 years, and over that time I've sort of made a few props and learned a little bit along the way. So today I'm talking about the wonderful world of props with you guys, and help you get a few pointers on making your next prop. So, why would you want a prop? It's heavy, you've got to carry around all day, but it's totally worth it going an extra mile for your costume. It adds a wow factor to your costume, it helps you get into character, and helps you do something with your hands so you feel like you're really getting in the zone with your character type. The classic definition for a prop in sort of traditional theatre is anything movable or portable on a stage or a set. It's distinct from the actors, scenery, costumes, electrical equipment. That's kind of an old school definition, but I feel it sort of applies with costuming now a bit. So to kick this off, I want you guys to name a prop for me. Can you like shout out at me? Name some props. Yeah, cut stuff, yeah. So you guys named a lot of props, but that's like a small part of what props really are. So I did a bit of a brainstorm and classified it into sort of 3 sections. So I have weapons on one side, objects, so anything you're holding, is like any inanimate object can be a prop. So food, Daenerys, dragon egg, just it's endless the amount of things you can have as a prop. And I feel like with cosplay, the line between costume and prop is sort of blurred, and things become sort of an extension to your costume. But it's a lot like a prop in a way because you use the same sort of techniques to make it. So things like wings, my shoes can be counted as a prop nearly because they're so huge. And just things like masks, helmets, stuff like that. So how do you get started? So this is the stuff I'm going to be covering in my panel. I'm going to help you with the getting started stuff. I'm going to go over a few materials. I'm going to go through how to mix materials together using different ones interchangeably. Go through a few tips and tricks, and I'm going to go through a bit of posing and safety stuff. Alright, getting started. So where to start? It can be quite daunting when you find a prop you want to make, so maybe a 2-meter long rifle, and you're like, oh, where do I start? So a lot of people don't realise that Google's a thing. You can Google it. There's probably tutorials that exist out there. So just do all your research as much as you can, and just look at all the different types of techniques other people's using and sort of pick and prefer and what sort of suits you. There's a few things you need to think about when you're doing your prop, and for number 6, they have accuracy, practicality, budget, and time. So there's 4 sort of factors you need to sort of weigh up what's more important to you. So maybe you might want to go for like 100% accuracy, but the last sort of 95%, the 5% at the end would be really expensive, it might be like impractical, like hard to carry. So you do think about all these things as you're planning out your prop. And plan. I usually plan for like a month ahead before I even start touching the materials for making it. So something that I personally like to do is to try and scale my prop to my own height. So I have a little like math calculation there if you guys aren't math savvy. So we need to do this sort of a quick little calculation is you put down an image of a character with the prop in the image as well. And what you do is you just measure the height of the character, so it could be 10 centimetres if it's on an A4 sheet, and then measure the height of the rifle. And then the last thing you need to know is your own height. And so just with a little calculation here, you can work out what the height of your prop should be to match the proportionality. This is a really cool tip I like to do. When I did Yoko, I'm 160 and my rifle is 170. But the actual character Yoko is a lot taller than I am, so her actual rifle would have been a lot longer. But I wanted my rifle to suit my own height. Yeah. So when you're planning it out, you need to think of a lot of different things. You need to be able to think in 3D. So, I mean, you could just cut something out in a 2D piece of paper, but it looks a lot cooler if you think about what it looks like in 3D. So, for example, my Kenton key, I have sort of like semicircle shapes on here. I have little indents. I tried to think about what it would look like in real life, rather than just making a big flat sort of thing. You need to be able to break it down to pieces. So think about each of the components and how you're going to attach them together. You need to be able to think of contact area and just how all the pieces attach together. It's really important to think about detail because that's really what makes it really more realistic, because you can pay attention to all those little tiny details. These are some of the places where I buy my stuff. So for more arts and crafty stuff, you go to art shops. The things for like wood or equipment like hammers or chisels, things like that, you go to hardware stores. Things that are hard to find or more expensive in New Zealand, you can get them online. It's quite handy to get stuff online sometimes. Any questions at all so far? No? Okay, I'm going to go into the first material. I'm going to be doing wood and plastic together because they have very similar properties. Wood and plastic are both very hard and strong, but also rigid, so it can be quite difficult to cut them. So, also they can be a bit heavy. This particular Kingdom Key is a lot heavier than it might have needed to be because it's made a lot of wood and plastic. As I listed off a few materials that are here, I'm mostly going to be talking about MDF and plastic and more like PVC pipe and things like that. But there's also different options, different types you can use, and you need to be able to work them to their strengths. That's an image of Tail's cosplay. Her blade, Titus's blade, it's Perspex, which is the type of plastic. It's very rigid, and she cut it on a bandsaw, and the holes were done drills. Yeah. So these are some of the tools I used when I was creating Sora's Kingdom Keyblade. This thing here is called a sawhorse, and it's used for holding down the wood while you're cutting it. It's really handy to be able to securing your wood piece really well when you're cutting it, because it can be quite dangerous if it moves. I have a drill, I have an electric saw, chisel, and a whole bunch of different drill pieces of different sizes. It can be really important when you're using a sort of power tools and things like that, because it can be really dangerous. You need to have someone that knows how to use them properly, so you're using it in a really safe way, so just be careful. Okay, so I'm going to go through sort of step by step how I made my Kingdom Key, so you can sort of understand how it works. So the handle part, the yellow, and the teeth of the end of the keyblade are made out of MDF wood. The most difficult part about this was that all the little cutouts around the key teeth was really difficult to get into. So the technique I used is I drilled a bunch of holes. So I have a big hole right in the centre to remove as much material as possible, and I have a bunch of really small holes in the corners, so just to get into that really tiny area. And this was really good because I could aim for the holes and saw straight towards the hole in a straight line and just hit all the points. You can see in this image here that I've drawn a bunch of straight lines around the curved edge, and that's because when you're sawing, you can only saw in a straight line, you can't saw in a curved shape. So I roughly made a bunch of lines to make a rough sort of bent shape, and then after that I went in with a chisel and hammer to knock out the last bits of material, and then a buttload of sandpaper, lots and lots of sanding to make that smooth shape. So this was an issue for me because it was really tricky to try. I have a broomstick which is that goes right through the top section here, and it's got a circular cross section, but I needed to attach it into a notch that was square shaped. So what I had to do is I had to cut down the shape of the circular broomstick into a square cross section so that it would fit nicely into the gap. And I sanded it down really flat, and then the semicircles were glued straight on top to cover up where the seams were. So it just looks really clean and nice and flawless, and it means that there's no gaps or holes, and it's just super, super strong. The reason I made this into two pieces was because the Kingdom Key is actually narrower on the blue and black area, but it's wider in the silver area. So I actually got a PVC pipe in the silver section, and then I have a wooden broomstick in the smaller area. And so I need to figure out how to attach these together in a really strong way so that it would work well. So what I've actually have rubber bands and chopsticks attached temporarily on there. And I did this so that, because a chopstick is a very tapered shape, it goes narrow and then it goes wider. So what I was able to do is I lathered it in hot glue and then just hammered it inside the PVC pipe until it wouldn't go any further. So that means that it was a really tight fit, it was lots of glue in there, lots of contact area, and it wasn't going to come out ever. So after I'd done that, I cut off the chopsticks and then wrapped it in blue electrical tape so you can't see it, it looks nice and clean. And then it's all white there, you can see it's got the base coat. The key was the teeth part in the end was attached by just cutting a little notch in the PVC pipe and just slotting it straight on top with lots of glue. The top of it's just capped with a bit of hot glue, just like shaped nice and smooth, go on the top. You need to be careful when you're thinking about spray painting when you're painting it, because you're painting both sides, you can't put it down on the ground, it needs to be hung up or suspended for a few hours so that it can dry properly. So that's something to think of. So I made sure to have the metal bit in the top put in so it can hang nicely. I had a bit of an accident 2 weeks before the contest where it snapped in half because it was dropped. It was a bit of a freak accident, it really sucked, but I was able to put a piece of wooden dowel inside and just reinforce it again. So there's like a little seam. It's right here. You can't tell too much. And then I have the reference image to show that I did the same scaling method that I explained before, so I'm pretty happy with the proportions and how it turned out. And then that's me. Okay, so the next material I'm going to go into is foam. Foam is very different to plastic and wood, mainly because it's flexible, it's not rigid, it's a lot easier to cut and sort of shape, because it's easier to cut, obviously. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with foam, such as heat forming. I'm mostly going to talk about EVA foam, because that's what I'm used to using, but there's tons of different types you can use for different applications. Things like upholstery foam you can use for like styling wigs, like foam core wigs, have you heard of that? And just, there's different types of EVA foam. You can get thinner stuff, you can get thicker stuff. And a few different types here have sort of a thin, really thin craft foam and stuff you get from $2 shops. Then you also get sort of medium-sized foams, and you can get the really thick as hardcore stuff. They all behave in a very similar way. There's different qualities, and you need a different amount of heat to try and get that shape when you're shaping it. So these are Tasha's Oblivion Oathkeeper Keyblades over here. I'm just going to get her to pop up and have a quick chat about how she made those.
Hey everyone! So these are my 2 Keyblades that I entered into Wellington competition just a couple of months ago. I had made a Keyblade previously about 2 years ago, and I used a different kind of foam called expanding foam, and you can buy it at Mitre 10, any hardware store, and what you're meant to use it for is filling in cracks and things like that. So it comes in about that size can, and you spray it on and you leave it for about half an hour and it puffs up. And then you can carve it down with either a scalpel or a craft knife. So that's how I made my first Keyblade, and I wasn't very happy with it because it was very lumpy and bumpy, and back then I didn't know gesso existed, so I couldn't make it smooth. But with my Keyblades here, I use, as you can see in the images there, I started with a base of Eva foam, and then to reinforce it, I cut some wooden dowels. And for this one it was very easy. The dowel goes straight up the middle, and it gives it a bit more 3D weight. You can kind of see there. But for Oathkeeper, you can see that it's pronged at the middle, so I couldn't have a strong middle base. So I reinforced it in the middle here. So I had, as well as the dowel, I reinforced it with another piece of wood and then wrapped it in masking tape and just prayed. And well, it survived 2 cons so far, so yeah. So after the base and the wood went down, I wrapped it all in masking tape, and then I primed it with gesso, which is basically a type of primer, and I sanded it back, and then after that I added a couple of layers of modelling clay, and that was to give it a bit more depth. And with modelling clay you can sand it a bit more vigorously, and it gets it nice and smooth. And after I gessoed it, I painted it. These, I think from memory, I spray painted, and then after that I painted, hand painted all the detail, and especially on Oblivion I feathered a lot of the detail since it's meant to be a corrupt Keyblade. I just went with the theme of darkness to make it a bit more nitty and gritty, unlike Oathkeeper, which is a lot more cleanly shaded, things like that. Then afterwards I just sealed it with a sealer. I think I used Podge, and yeah.
Thanks, Tash. So the cool thing about our Keyblades when we did our skit in Wellington was that my Keyblade's quite heavy and quite heavy duty, and hers are quite light. So when we did our skit, it was more of I was defending and she was knocking her Keyblades against mine, so that made sure that I wasn't destroying hers. It worked quite well that way. So this is a thing that's not quite a prop, but it's sort of, I'm going to classify it as a prop. So I made if you saw me yesterday, I was wearing this costume. I have these shin and arm guards made of EVA foam. The dark blue one, which was used to be green, was a very thin craft foam, like the $2 shop stuff. And I chose to do a thin foam for this because I wanted it to be creased to get that nice sort of lined effect. And I actually got an iron and ironed those creases in, so it's like a nice clean shape. And then I use a thicker foam, the black, so that it has a nice curved shape, like flipped up ends. You can see what it's like beforehand when it was flat, and then when they're curved with a heat gun. So when you're painting foam, you need to lay down a PVA coat seal, otherwise the paint just soaks straight to the foam. So you have a nice flat cover for the PVA, you can do quite good painting effects. And at the end, seal it again with PVA, so it's sealed nicely. So this is what it looks like when it's nicely painted and done. And I have another detail from that same costume, which was the queen collar. This one was a lot harder as my other first. I painted it the shape with newspaper, so I got the rough idea what it was going to look like. When I was heat forming this, it was really hard because each of the segments needed to be heated independently, because when you go to heat the next section, you're reheating what you just did and undoing the work, and it's just a real pain. So I had to pile up like 5 details and just had the one section revealed, and I had to heat that and hold it in place for like a bit until it was fine, then move on to the next section. So it was a lot more tedious than I thought it was going to be. So next section I'm going to, your question?
Yeah, I was just thinking one way of getting around that problem would be to actually, I just want to keep the other areas cool with sort of wet towels or ice or something like that to keep them while you're heat gunning the bit in the next bit along.
Yeah, that could work. You just need to make sure that you're not blasting the heat onto those areas, so you could use something cold. But I found tea towels just work quite well. I had them lying around. Just did that. The next one I'm going into is mixed materials, so if you're able to mix and match different materials and use the different materials to their own strengths, that's where the magic happens. You can make really, really cool stuff. So the most important thing when you're mixing materials is the right adhesive that works with the right material. If you mix styrofoam and superglue, it's a bad idea. It's actually highly corrosive, and it's amazing to watch actually. Maybe you should try it so you can see. You drip a bit of superglue on, and just rapidly corrodes and disappears. It's like so insane. But not if you're trying to make a costume, it disappears. So I found this really cool chart in Google, so you just like match up the different materials that tells you which adhesives work together. I listed down a few adhesives that I've used with those materials that work really well, and those found worked. So I'm going to go through how I made my store shoes, because I had a lot of questions about it. I used a tutorial that a cosplayer from America. She helped me a lot. I asked her a few questions. She sent me a bunch of images, which helped a lot with making these. So really, it's her idea, but I did it my way. So it's going to look ugly before it looks good. I started off with some Crocs glued to some cardboard. Gorgeous, right? So I started off with that, and then I built it up with a bit of foam. I had this like slightly thicker, really soft, flexible foam here. It was really good for making the shoes because I could just make nice curved shapes really easily. Just glued it around the croc, and then the front I just had like a bent piece of cardboard to try and get that clown shoe shape in the front. After that I built up more layers around the back of the ankles to try and make them extra huge. I stuffed it with newspaper in the centre just to try and fill up that space and keeping it light. After I'd done that I just got some teddy bear fluff, mixed it with PVA with water and just brushed it all over. And also the top part too, the little high tops are a bit puffy. I wanted to get that nice sort of animated shape. So I just glued down all that fluff, and after that I got masking tape and made sort of a crisscross latticing pattern. So there's lots of big gaps at the beginning, and so I can sort of add more fluff or take some out to try and get the shape that I wanted to make it really nice curved shape. And then I just sort of gradually did more masking tape until there was no gaps left, and it looked really nice and smooth after that. So the method I did was I stretched stretchy fabric over the top to make that smooth shape, but I found that the masking tape was still a little bit pointy, so I laid down sort of some skin-coloured stockings covering it, and then a white layer because the yellow fabric was a little bit transparent. And that was just all hot glued down, and I added the tongues as well, just put a craft foam with fabric over the top. I was really annoyed because I wanted to get the big oversized zippers, but the only place you can get them is in America. And they're about $9. I'm like, that sounds reasonable. But then shipping was like $40. So I was like, why life? So I made my zipper out of foam. I just cut out the top part so that there's like open zip part of the top, and then it's sort of a closed zip down the rest of the toe. When I was putting the fabric on top, I actually covered the zipper because I needed to stretch the fabric really tight. I pinned it all over the place and then hot glued the underside of the shoe. It also has a bit of bias trim around the black just for the detailing. Then you can see that I cut out the section where the zip was, and then sort of had the bias glued down, and then I sort of sandwiched the fabric inside, hot glued it, and then closed it shut, so there was no hot glue seams sort of showing. It's all just like smooth fabric. And that's when they're nearly done. You see like the big sort of silver toe bit in the front and the undersole. And they're done. Cool, so now I'm going to go into Yoko's rifle. I made this a while ago, so at the moment it's in like pieces in the middle of sort of fixing it up. But I want to play a game with you guys. I have some letters and I have some material types listed at the top. I want you guys to try and guess some of the materials. If you can name a letter and then a material, it'd be really cool. Stick your hand up, somebody. Yes?
I'm guessing H is a broomstick.
H, yes. H is a broomstick. That's a good easy one. Any other guesses?
Well,
Yep.
that would logically mean the PVC pipe would be D.
Yes, that's correct.
gun sight.
PVC pipe is D. Any other guesses of the harder ones?
B is a wine bottle.
B, yep. B's got the bottleneck in there, yep. It's actually plastic, not a wine bottle. Yep.
E is plastic cardboard.
E, yes, it is plastic cardboard. God, you guys are good. I thought it was going to be harder.
What's left?
Yeah, so this is the answers. That is plastic cardboard, all the box shapes, like this part, magazine, and the bit on the end is all plastic cardboard. You know the kind of stuff you get for advertisements for houses? It's that sort of stuff you get from craft stores. I find it's a lot better than cardboard because it's waterproof, and it's just really nice and clean. What I've done is I scored with scored the plastic with a metal ruler and a knife, and then that helped me to get the clean, sort of straight folds in the plastic. I carved the handle out of wood, so it has a sort of a nice ergonomic shape. Just a bit of wood for that part. It's actually a stand, it flips out, and you can stand up for when Yoko's like sniping in the grass. I have wire to suspend the scope along the top, and yeah, you guys guessed everything else really. The sheet plastic was used to attach all the segments. So these are all just like blocks and like pieces, and I glued one side to the segments and then just wrapped it over the top of the broomstick and glued it to the other side. So there's no hot glue blobs showing anywhere, so just like clean. It looks nice. Yeah, so this is another prop that I scaled. I scaled all the segments using my own sort of proportions and measuring each segment. So that's how that is compared to the reference image that I used. There's also a hidden pocket in the back. So it's in pieces because the broomstick is in pieces, but this back part, it opens up so I can stick my wallet, food, snacks, stuff like that. Because it's such a heavy, big thing that you can't carry a bag with at the same time. It's a bit tricky. So that was a handy feature. So the important thing when you're making something like this is you need to think about the contact area. You need to think of how everything's going to be attached. For the carved handle, I cut out a curved sort of semicircle so that it fit really nice and close to the broomstick. So it just is a lot more stronger that way. And the problem with this prop is I couldn't find a broomstick that was long enough. I actually made this prop with stuff I found in a garage, so it cost me like $0. At the time I was super broke, and I went down to Hamilton with $6 in my bank account. So this is like a quick, crazy budget prop. So go this really quick. This is my first contest entry. It's a really good example of mixing materials together. So I used this thermoplastic strap. It's used for boxing up stuff with industry, like big boxes of stuff. But it was too flexible and it wasn't stiff enough to make this sort of nice butt cage shape. So I made a wire skeleton to go underneath. I wanted to be really accurate and geometric, so I drew it out in chalk on the carpet. My parents didn't really like me that much. And I used that as a guide for bending the wire so it was even both sides. And then just a lot of staples to hold it together. That's my cat. This one trick I found with the hat was that after I'd glued all these like fabric feathers onto the back with hot glue, it was weighted too heavily at the back and it kept falling backwards. I pulled my wig off and I was such a pain. So what I actually did was I made little hacky sacks, got some rice and fabric, little bean bags, and I hid them behind the bow in the front to counterbalance that weight, so it pulled it forward and just sat balanced better on my head. And the flowers are made out of paper. So I'll give you guys a few tips and tricks, mostly for when you're at a convention. You need to think practically when you have your prop. I mean, you can make something really cool, really awesome, really huge, but how are you going to walk around with that all day? How heavy is it? You can do it freehand to sort of look at stuff and like talk to people, or is it going to be like a pain at the end of the day? It needs to be durable enough that it can be bumped around and not break. There's different things you can do, such as you have a little holster for carrying things, like a little loop to carry like small props, or you can add a strap to it so you can carry it over your shoulder. That makes it a lot easier. For my costume removal yesterday, the bell fans touched nicely to my skirt, so I had both my hands free when I didn't want to be playing with the fans. This is another tip. When we did a shoot for High School of the Dead, if you don't know, it's an apocalypse high school anime. So I had this broomstick. It's a broomstick that broke off in this magical way where it was sharp on the end somehow. So I wanted to have a few poses where I was stabbing people, and you can't stab your friends when you have a sharp thing on the end. So I made it detachable. It comes off with loose tack, so I could pull it off and stick it on again whenever I wanted for different poses. That was quite cool. Okay, so I'm going to go over posing with props. Anyone have questions about materials at all? No? Okay, so I love alliteration, so 5 posing pointers. The thing with, because my panel's about props, I'm talking about how would you pose with a prop, but you need to have that balance between your costume and your props. You need to be thinking about what's the focus of your costume. So if you're all about the costume and the props just need to support the costume, maybe you want to have the props sort of behind you so you can see the entire costume. If you're all about the prop, maybe you want it to be sort of in front of you, maybe covering your face, like, it depends where that focus is in your photos. A really good point is that you need to maybe look at a few reference images before you're cosplaying your character, just so you know how your character holds themselves, what they do with their props, and how they move. A particular, sort of an obvious, exaggerated example is Death the Kid. If you don't know the anime Soul Eater, he shoots his guns with his pinkies. So if you didn't know that, then you know it's a shame if you're cosplaying a character and you're doing it wrong. It's just all those sort of details and things like that that can make it more convincing when you're posing for photos. Another really good point is play pretend. So maybe you made your prop really good, it's really light, that's what you wanted, but it's meant to be heavy and your character's like maybe a strong, burly guy. A good way to want to play pretend, to pretend that it is heavy. So if you're having a prop that's pretending it's heavy, maybe you want to sort of have your arms sort of like more slack, so you're like holding something that's quite heavy. You don't be like swinging around like, oh yeah, it's made of foam. You want to play pretend and pretend that it is a heavy thing. Especially with swords, I see people like flying, you know, have a sword over their shoulder or like touching the blade. It's like, no, you wouldn't do that. You'd be cutting yourself. It's like, you know, it's way more convincing if you're pretending it's a real prop. So another good thing to think about is camera angles. So I have a little drawing here. So this is the eye of the camera, and the dashed line is the line of vision. And the best angle for your prop, because you always know what, you know, the best angle for your face, but what's the best angle for your prop? Which is good side. So the good side of your prop is at a 90-degree angle to the line of vision. So if you're looking at my prop, this is the best angle for you to see what it looks like. That's 90 degrees. The worst angle would be 0 degrees. I mean, you can't tell what it looks like. It looks kind of stubby. You don't know what it actually is. But so 90 degrees is the best and 0 degrees is the worst. I see a lot of people when they go to parades or they go on stage and, you know, they want to go for that really dramatic look and they're really excited, and so their first instinct is to get their gun or their sword, and they point it straight at the camera, and so you've gone straight for that 0 degrees and you can't tell what it is you're looking at. Yes?
Two things, yeah, I'll just point out like two things happen when you do that. You either lose focus on the prop if you're aiming at the costume, because the prop's out of your depth of field. So that gets fuzzy, and yeah, as you see, you can't see what it is. But even if you're holding at a 90-degree angle, don't have the blade edge onto the camera. I've actually seen a sword disappear in the photograph doing that.
That's a very good point, yeah.
Yeah, so always aim flat